Hello and welcome. Today we have the most wonderful guests. This is Chris and Parisa Shelton from Burbank, I believe, in LA. Welcome, guys. I'm so excited to have you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be on your podcast.
Absolute pleasure. So the reason that I've invited you guys on today is that I really believe in the work that you're doing. As a lot of people already would have heard on this podcast, that I am a martial artist, and you guys also are martial artists and have a history with martial arts. And so there was an immediate synergy when we first spoke in terms of not just the combat and fighting arts, but also the healing side of martial arts. So I really love if you could introduce yourselves to my listeners and just tell me a little bit about what you guys do.
You want to go first?
You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So once again, my name is Chris Shelton, and my wife, Parisa, and I own and operate the Morning Crane Healing Arts Center, both in San Jose, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as here in Los Angeles. We teach the practice of, there's two components of our business. One component is we see patients in clinic with utilizing classical Chinese medicine, almost like an old form of acupuncture. And then we teach classes in Qigong and then other wellness classes as well too. But the main thing is that the Qigong that we're teaching, there's different styles. There's the internal style for internal martial arts and such, but more importantly, the style that we teach is for mental health. And we're clinical directors for all of California for the Special Olympics for a new program called Healthy Athletes, Strong Minds, where we give these tools to the athletes, coaches, and their families in order to deal with, not only the stress of competition, but more importantly, like, what do you do if somebody's bullying you? What do you do if you get into an argument with somebody, right? And most people don't realize this, but people with intellectual disabilities tend to have a shorter lifespan than someone without intellectual disabilities. And besides that, we teach for the HHS, which is the hospital system. So we teach mindfulness classes for first responders, for the patients of Santa Clara County. And then also we have a teacher training program. And then also we have a Chi Club that's every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 8 to 8:30. And so that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so just a little bit. You're just doing a little bit, right?
Just a little bit. Our elevator pitch, if you will,
yes,
is that we help natural remedy seekers relieve pain, reduce stress, and access higher levels of well-being.
Oh, I like that.
That doing private sessions and group classes, we do it online and in person. So it's just so fun. And then we get to work together. We're a husband and wife team. It's definitely a family business that's growing, because as things kind of shake up, people are becoming more and more aware of, like, I need to take care of my body physically and emotionally. And that's kind of what Chris just said. Our sweet spot is helping people process and deal with day-to-day emotions and also past trauma, stress, and strife. So
yeah. So, and considering what the whole world has been going through, because we had this large county contract with Santa Clara County where we were in charge of the 23,000 employees for employee wellness, we got to see really the numbers for the suicide rates, spousal abuse, child abuse increase, relapse with addiction, alcoholism, because people didn't have the tools. Like, there's so much fear, there's so much unknown. And what Qigong does is that it empowers people to take care and take charge of their wellness, because in Chinese medicine, they say that the superior doctor is one that can prevent disease before disease sets in. So what it does is that it gives you the tools to be able to recognize when disease is setting in. And, mental health is also a disease. And in Chinese medicine, it's actually not just up here, but like when a patient comes in, we look at other organ imbalances which affect the heart, which then affect this up here. So what we found is through this whole ordeal that's gone on, is that it really gave people the tools, especially people that were, really in lockdown, right, and not seeing family and stuff. It really gave them a sense of community and hope, and also helped to deal with their emotional stress surrounding what was going on in their environment.
Absolutely. There's so much I could talk to in what you've just said. First thing before we go on, can you say, what is Qigong?
So Qigong is a 5,000-year-old practice at least. It's the foundation of acupuncture. It's the foundation of Tai Chi. And Qi is the life force energy that emanates through all living things. Everything is an expression of Qi. Even, the chair you're sitting on is an expression of Qi and matter to some level, right? And Gong is a skill in which to harness this life force energy. And in this case, in order to improve the functionality of your internal organ system, which then brings about better health and vitality. So anytime you see the word gong used in this context, then it means skill. So like gong fu means skill with a fist. So Qigong is teaching you the skill in which to harness this energy that's around us, but also contained within us too. And what I'd like to tell people is, like, if you have no idea what Qi is, and when I was first introduced to Qigong when I was 19 years old, and the gentleman who introduced me to it was talking about Qi, I was like, oh, there's no such thing as Qi. There's like Cheese whiz and cheese its, right? But what I tell people is I think of it in terms of your blood or fluids inside your body. So we have a saying that the blood contains the Qi, and Qi moves the blood around the body. So it's not separable. So it's intertwined, which then falls back to the foundations of yin and yang philosophy as well. So Qigong is and what we love about it is that Qigong is easier to practice than Tai Chi. And we have paraplegics that take the classes, even if you're somebody that has some type of inflammatory disease where we've seen some people with like lupus, for example, they can't lift their arms up. Believe it or not, just using the mind intent is powerful enough to start to change the process of the inflammation in the body, which is creating those symptoms.
And I love that, we can put these things in Western terms. So what you were just talking about then reminds me of neuroplasticity, the way that we create new neural pathways in the body. But what I also really love about what you guys do is just that you talk about mental health arising in the body. That so much in the West, is focused on the rational, the logical, the mindfulness, the mental side of things. And what I love about traditional Chinese medicine or TCM and what you guys, the paradigm that you guys work from, is that it really understands the somatic. It understands that mind and body work together, and actually often it's body-mind, not mind-body. We sort of say it the wrong way around in a way. I don't want to say wrong, but you know what I mean. Right. And so I think that's really great. And there's so much we could talk about to distill the essence of TCM in this conversation. But what I'm interested in is your story. I'd love to hear a little bit about why do you guys do this work? What brought you to this work?
Where to begin?
Go for it. You got time.
Parisa stories?
Well, let's see. My story was that I grew up in Silicon Valley, and both of my parents are PhD physicists, and also from two different cross cultures. My dad's from Iran, and my mom is from the East Coast, from Philadelphia. Her descendant is Russian Jewish. So usually for like a Muslim and a Jewish person to get married and have kids in a lot of situations wouldn't be acceptable. But in Silicon Valley, pretty much the birthplace of innovation and like the technological development that we've seen in our lifetime has been amazing. So grew up through that, and then went to UC Santa Cruz, was kind of floating around, and I went and worked for my parents. They have a high-tech company. Cool. And I did high-tech equipment sales and traveled around the world selling the NK analyzer. And then I realized that it was like not really what I wanted to do, and it was challenging working with my mom. Any mother-daughters out there can relate, like it can be very challenging. Yeah. And we step back into like our old patterns of, instead of like employer-employee, that kind of relationship, it was like mother-daughter. So anyway, that wasn't working. And I joined a gym down the street. I started taking this aerobics class, which transitioned into Pilates. And I just fell in love with like the movement system. And my teacher at the time took me under her wing. And then I started going to the local junior college again, got my massage license, studied, fell in love with like anatomy and physiology, did functional movement. And then I had a boyfriend and we had like a sad breakup. And that was the catalyst. One of client, actually a mutual client of Chris and I's, we had this whole conversation about finding your soulmate. And then during a private Pilates session, and then she came back the next week and was like, I got the person for you.
Guess what? We found him. I love
There's
that.
a whole other backstory of why in my mind that wasn't going to work.
Oh, you can go ahead and say it because it's just it's really being real.
Okay,
You've got to be real on this podcast, 100%.
Yeah, let's be real. Let's be real.
Okay, we're being real on this podcast. So she's like, I was in his office. He had a massage shared office space.
Yeah.
And because she knew that I was starting to study Qigong through at Dianza. Okay. And then she's like, so he had this trophy. Chris had just won this martial arts competition and like this 6 foot tall trophy. And she bumped into Chris and somehow she thought of me. And then she was telling me he's so cool and he's got like tattoos on his arms. But by the way, and she's like, he's got 4 kids but you'll really like him. And I was like, I'm my 29-year-old self with my cat. I was like, I don't think that's going to work.
4 kids. Yeah.
4 kids.
Yeah. Amazing. And so
2 ex-wives and a partridge in a pear tree I came with.
Oh my gosh. And so
I had the
how did you get around that? Like how did you come to terms with that?
I hadn't come to terms with it at that time, so I kind of like erased it from my mind and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, the Pilates studio that I was working for, my boss suddenly got threatened by me. And instead of like helping me expand and grow into the next.
Oh, right. Felt competitive, right.
Yeah. It was like more of a competition now.
Yeah.
So suddenly fired me from working there.
Oh.
Pushed me out of the nest. And then I'm going through this process of like, I have clients and a practice that I'm continuing and I just looking for a space or like networking or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's when I found Chris's card because I was like on the phone, emailing, doing all the things.
Yeah.
And I called and left a message. Hey, Chris, this is Parisa. Just wanting Lori Kirk told me about what you do, possibly looking for an office space. Can we have a meeting or whatever? And then he called me back. Yeah. And then I remember because you called me Teresa. Hey, Teresa, this is Chris Shelton.
Teresa, you must get that a little bit.
I do. Yeah. Just a little. Yeah. And then it was so wild because it was literally like love at first sight.
Aww.
When we first met, it was so intense. And
that's cool.
Connected right away.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So when she made the meeting, I wasn't expecting a date. This was just a normal.
It was a business meeting.
Meeting. She might have been a client, a subcontractor,
right?
Ran out of space. This is what I was thinking. So when I said let's meet for lunch or an early dinner, that would be no different than anybody else that would contact me over the same thing.
You didn't put your nice shirt on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I had slacks.
She had slacks on. She was dressed nice. She had slacks, a resume in her hand. And I was in my treatment room and I heard her walking. I walked out and it was like the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show. When I saw her, it was like, Bluga,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we went, there's a organic Fresh Mex place down the street from the office. And we went there and a couple of mango margaritas later.
Nice.
3 o'clock in the morning, I said, I still haven't seen that resume, but you're hired.
I got the job.
That's brilliant. But so then was it like you were working together and dating then? Was like, what happened?
Yeah, it was so interesting because we had both separately been co-manifesting.
Right.
In the chi field without really knowing it. Nice. I had got this book called The Soulmate Secret. how to manifest your soulmate. And that's actually for any of the ladies looking for love. That's a good
hot tip.
reference.
Hot tip.
Hot tip. I did the audiobook. I'm just an audio learner.
Nice.
I told them, this is so fascinating how it's unfolding. I've been co-creating and like imagining you in my life this whole time, even to the point where the left side of my closet is empty.
Oh, wow. I love that. You made space.
And I made space. But
I love that.
What did you tell me after that?
Well, she not only did she have the left side of her closet open, but also a couple left drawers open.
Yeah.
And I said, you're kidding me, because I've been waiting for you, because I have the right side of my closet.
Oh, I love it.
And the right drawers opened up. So it was really funny how
it was like the opposite, and we both had done that same thing.
It's yin yang.
I know.
Yeah, yin yang, right.
Yeah, nice.
So there's all these like serendipitous, like little things that lined up for us that just.
And you trained in like parallel, because like you clearly have very twin intentions, but different roles.
Yeah.
You know, like you can see that. And so it's really interesting, isn't it? That's amazing. So how long have you been together now?
11 years.
11 years.
Me and my husband too.
Oh, yes.
I love it.
So we got married
good year.
11 at 11.
Right, cool. Just for a little bit of symbolism, just a little bit.
And it wasn't planned. I didn't realize it till after the fact. But
really?
I proposed to her on 10-10-10.
Oh, nice.
So
lots of ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Nice.
But on my end, the start was I grew up in a dysfunctional home. There was abuse and neglect. Started doing drugs at age 12. And started working by age 11. So it's kind of on my own, not completely, but I had to really take care of myself. My younger brother, my older brother was in trouble with the law a lot. I was very ambitious though. So even though I was doing drugs, I had a lot of drive. So by 15 and a half, I started my career to become a butcher, which I did for 21 years. I did my AP studies in art. I also got my Class A state brake license, my license for overhauling engines, and tune-up an electrical system. So I go to high school part-time, then they send me into an adult educational school, and this is where I got these licenses. But so I was always a planner. Like, okay, well, if I don't make it as a butcher, I'll be an artist, and if I don't make it as an artist, I'll be a mechanic. But age 18, my senior year, I had my first heart attack from a meth overdose.
Jeez, young.
And the mistake was, well, there's a lot of mistakes, but I heard the yard doctor outside the curtain talking to my father saying, well, if he was any older, he would have died. And that he got a hold of some bad stuff. So I thought I just got a hold of some bunk meth, right? So a couple months later, I used again and had another heart attack. But if anybody out there is an addict or suffered with addiction, the shame around the addiction, right? Because, so I was so ashamed over the first heart attack that this time I was just willing to die. So I didn't call the paramedics or anything. I was just willing to die. Luckily, I pulled through. Sure enough, the cardiologist did confirm that there was a second, more minor heart attack. So then what I did was I put myself into Taekwondo to change my path. So now I'm 19 years old. So this is where my martial arts career began. And I started competing right away. And one night before a match, I was kicked in the back and couldn't walk, or barely was able to walk. And doctors said, Chris, if you're not careful, you might not walk again, which led me to a doctor who had a therapist working for her, and he was a martial artist, and he was the one who started talking to me about Qi. And this is over 27 years ago. And so nobody was talking about Qigong in the U.S. back then. Very few people talking about Tai Chi, but let alone Qigong. And I had other health problems too. I had severe digestive problems. If I ate any type of fat, like a pork chop or an avocado or salad, anything of that nature, I was vomiting an hour or two later or in the fetal position in so much pain. And I had every test done in Western medicine at the time, upper GI, lower GI, you name it. I lived on antibiotics. I lived on over-the-counter medication. I had severe chronic sinusitis. and I lived on antibiotics with that. And I had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Not so bad to where I couldn't like go out of the house, but I was definitely somebody who was checking the stove at least 30 times a night, or checking the door locks. And and so anyway, so fast forward, so I started doing these Qigong classes, and I kid you not, within about 6 months or so, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but it's like, man, when did I stop living on the antibiotics? When did I stop having to take the medication for my stomach? I couldn't tell you when the pinpoint date was, but I knew there was a change. Now, back then, I didn't really feel Qi, but there was a change. Definite change. And I thought if a simple, specific movement and specific meditation could do this to me, there must be something to the medicine. So that's when I started studying Chinese medicine. And that's what started, my career. And so I was a butcher. I had full custody. I was a single father at the time, full custody of my older 2 kids. And then I got into another relationship, then had 2 other kids. And so as my business increased with Morning Crane, that's the name of the business, Morning Crane Healing Arts Center, I was able to cut back my hours as a meat manager, as a butcher. But
you kept the uniform. You kept the bald head and the white coat just to...
White coat. Exactly. Except at least there's no blood on me.
and the sharp knives.
And the sharp knives, yeah. So yeah. But anyways, so that's what started to launch the career. And I had a lot of naysayers. You know, what's interesting about Parisa's story, what happened with her mentor with Pilates, that first instructor that I had did the same thing to me. So for years, him and his ex-wife, she's a prominent second generation acupuncturist, were telling me, Chris, you should do this for a living. Like, you're a natural teacher, you should do this. And when I finally took the chance and I stepped out, this woman named Janet, she was a massage therapist working at a clinic in Los Gatos, California. She said, you'd be great. Well, at the time, you know, I was a single father of 2 kids as a meat manager. I was like, how am I going to go from cutting up dead cows all day and managing these knuckleheads to healing people? So out of fear, by Friday, I was going to say no.
Right.
And when I picked up the phone to call her, I seriously heard a voice or something saying, this is your last chance this lifetime.
Wow.
So here we go.
You listened.
Yeah.
You answered the call.
I answered.
You answered the call, literally. It's really interesting when you talk about, you know, that shift from mentor to like competitor, rejector, you know, like so the name of this podcast is Unboxable, Unstoppable. And one of the things that I believe about that, I think and that was again, a bit of a name that it literally just came to me and I started it, and it's a good name. And it's, funnily enough, the only podcast called that anywhere in the world that I can find. So, and I think that the reason it came and the reason it fits is because a lot of the people I find in conversation like this, you know, that I get on the podcast, have had that similar experience where they were existing in a particular paradigm or container, if you like, that wasn't big enough for us. And at some moment, something or someone pushes you out of that container. Or sometimes it's ourselves, and we realize that we're in a box too small for us, and we have to create a bigger container. We have to expand. And the only way to expand when you've outgrown a container is to change the container or get rid of the container altogether, you know, and I think that's why I like the word unboxable, unstoppable. Unboxable because this naturally occurs, right? And we can't, and the unstoppable because it naturally occurs, and unboxable because there is no box big enough for you when you're at that expansive kind of on that trajectory, right? Correct. And I think what's beautiful about some of the things I just want to pick up that you said, so the link between shame and addiction, you said, you know, the shame that comes from addiction, also the shame that often precedes addiction, right? You know, you talk about that earlier life, and so often there's a huge link there, and that is expressed in so many ways: addiction, organs, heart attacks, you know, all the various ways that it expresses. But also the stomach ailment thing. I was struck by that story because I had a similar thing. There was a time, again, I was working for one of my mentors. I was mentored by a lady, also started working really young. I was mentored by a lady, and She was my first employer, and then she was the person who employed me after my degree. She actually challenged me to get a degree. I did arts, not art, but arts at Sydney University, and history. And then I was working for her. She said, get a degree, come back to me. And then she employed me, and she was an amazing mentor, but I wasn't really ready. And she couldn't really mentor me either. Things had changed for her, and she was about to sell her business. I didn't know that. So I ended up getting fired from my sort of dream job, So she said, here's the job. And then she sort of, it was a pretty hard situation. And I think one of the things that really struck me was when I was working there, I went vegetarian for a while, but I was only like 22, and I wasn't very good at doing a vegetarian diet. So I ate a lot of the things you were just talking about, Chris, raw vegetables and, like things that, and I ended up this one time I went to work and I was doubled over in pain in the stomach, couldn't work it out. 1 month of stomach pain, went to doctors. They said, there's nothing wrong with you. But my mentor had an acupuncturist that she swore by. So after a month of me taking days off, she was like, can you go and see my acupuncturist, please? And sure enough, she put me on a diet of, broth and said, you need to eat meat for your body type. You need to eat certain meats and cooked foods, not raw foods, if you're going to eat vegetables and all the chi stuff. And then she did the acupuncture. And that was when I fell in love with traditional Chinese medicine. And it's helped me all my life. It's helped me have babies. It's, I've been very blessed with incredible practitioners. And there's that thing about we do draw to us the help that we need, much like, I had a session with Chris just recently. Highly recommend it, by the way. And similarly, a unique form of therapy or treatment, you're a unique practitioner, Chris. And so fascinating that now is the time that I bring that in. There's a few reasons that I'll do in another podcast because this one's not about me, but just amazing, I think, the way that we do that and the way you drew each other into each other as well. And I'd love to hear a little more about, so how can martial arts, and something like Qigong, which is a similar kind of, it's really an intersection of martial arts and Chinese medicine.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would.
Yeah. And I would definitely say that, the true martial artist is one that could heal as well, too.
Right.
It's not just about fighting and being able to heal yourself. And so, what's interesting is that I just got done writing an article for Black Belt Magazine in Europe on Qigong. In particular, I was asked, there's somebody close to the Bruce Lee estate that had a letter that Bruce Lee wrote to himself, because most people don't know that besides Wing Chun and stuff that Bruce Lee practiced, he also meditated a lot too. And in this letter, he's talking about how to cultivate internal force, internal chi from the Jing. He's talking about the power Jing and the Jing, which I explained in this article that's going to be coming out. So what I did was I took that translation. I don't translate Chinese. I had my Sifu, my teacher, translate it. And then from there, I was able to break it down into a medicinal understanding of what's going on inside the body to cultivate this internal power, right? So, and the nice thing about internal martial arts, so for viewers that don't know what internal martial arts is, internal martial arts would be Tai Chi, in particular, the Chen family from the Chen system, Chen Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, Yichuan. These are all internal systems of martial arts. And so it's more about cultivating its proper body alignment and structure, cultivating this internal power as opposed to brute force. And so when I was competing in Tai Chi tournaments, a difference from kickboxing when I did some of those with Kang Lee's fight team, kickboxing, we start off across the ring from the opponent. With Tai Chi, we start off touching the opponent.
Nice.
And so people will say, like in the Chen system, the traditional form is called Laojia, which are 75 postures. And the slow movements are all martial art applications.
Yeah.
And people say, well, how do you fight with it? Do you go, tag your it? And I'm like, no, like the slow movements teach you how to have proper body alignment mechanics. Because when you're out of alignment, you create weaknesses and deficiencies for yourself, especially in combat. And first and foremost, it teaches you how to listen. It's called listening to your own body.
Nice.
And then what happens is then if you decide to use it as a martial art, then you learn how to listen to your opponent.
Yes.
But if you go into clinic as a practitioner in Chinese medicine, then you learn how to listen to the symptoms of your patient.
Nice.
Listening is not only listening to what the person is saying, the tone of their voice, or what they are not saying, it's also listening to their body. It's also listening to the pulse, right? So when I say listening to the body, it's like palpation, those types of things, is feeling what's going on. That's called listening. So the sensitivity training is, can be used for martial arts, but also too definitely for healing oneself and to heal other people.
That's so interesting. So when we're training, I do Hapkido, Korean martial art, and there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of traditional elements in there, and I instruct women. So there's an element of training women that's a little different. And because we have a women's class, which is a great blessing, really, that I get to do that. I do talk a little more about this stuff in that class, and I use slightly different language, but I'm talking about the same stuff.
Right.
And some people come in, and men and women that I train with, and they're using their muscle, they're using their brute force.
Right.
And then they're like, why can't I? They try and put me down, and they're like, I can do this on everyone else, but I can't do it on you. And I'm not big, right? So it's not. Right. It's not that they're not able to do me because they can't physically throw me. They can. But sometimes if I decide, I don't know exactly how this works, and I guess it's the chi stuff. We call it ki, you call it chi.
Right.
Sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm going to challenge you, and I'll decide I'm going to not let them throw me.
Right.
And they get really annoyed, and they're like, why isn't it working? And I'll be like, because you're using your muscle. And you're not using Hapkido. You're not using, I just say Hapkido. You're not using technique.
Right.
Of course, there's an element of chi or ki in that. Right. That's really important. But we don't always say that overtly. I'll just say, use the technique. Use your dungeon, which is like the bit below the belly button, right? Yeah. So, and it's really interesting because same with me. Sometimes I'll be like so mentally focused on a technique that I'll forget, or get so in the corner of my mind that I'm not using my whole body and my whole dungeon and my whole chi. And I think this is such a great analogy for life, like when we get so obsessed about doing something a particular way or trying to control something we cannot control rather than flowing or surrendering or being like water, as Bruce Lee would say, or, it's a particular kind of, I call it, this sounds silly, and I'm sorry for the brutality of this, but I call it choking the monkey. I feel like, life is like a monkey. It jumps around and it's unpredictable, right? And then sometimes we try and grab it, and we grab it so hard that we stop it. And I say that because it just makes you think differently and laugh. But really what I mean is, you stop the flow. And I think sometimes we can get so attached to outcomes. We can become obsessive, and then we can be like, why isn't this working? I'm focusing so much on this. I'm doing it every day. I'm training hard. I'm, spending all my life on my computer to make this business work. Why isn't it working? Whatever you choose, whatever thing you choose as an example. But there's always an element of unpredictability, of mystery. I talk about it as mystery, of water, of chi, of life, that if we don't allow to flow, it arrests the development of it, doesn't it?
That's right. It's an allowing the chi to flow.
Right.
And what's also interesting, going back to Bruce Lee and thinking about his 1-inch punch.
Yes.
I mean, that has to come from an internal source, because you need like momentum in order to hit hard, and he would just have that one little inch of space and just develop such power from his lower dantian, and then really kind of do some damage. So that's kind of like the flip side of the coin.
100%. Right? And it's actually in our black belt pattern. We do a little, a very similar technique to the 1-inch punch. And it's one of my favorite techniques to do.
Wow.
It's very, very difficult in a way to learn, but I love it,
But once you set into it, and the posture is going to be very important, like how you position the body structure.
100%.
Once you set into it, then it's you overcome that hurdle or whatever. And so for an experienced practitioner, you could just put your focus to it, set into it, and then bam, watch out.
Yeah, and the structure, the posture, we call it the Wuji posture, which in Chinese means the nothingness, the emptiness.
Yeah, beautiful.
The Tao is considered Wuji, right? And so that posture, by tucking that sacrum underneath, pressing back what we call the Ming Men, which is the acupuncture point, in between the right and left kidney opposite the navel. In other professional sports, they practice Wuji. For example, they don't call it that. For example, if you see a professional baseball player swing the bat, is a Wuji. A tennis player, a hockey player, a golfer.
It's foundational.
Wuji posture. It's foundational. And I had forgotten some of the I was sparring one night with Sancho. I was fighting or competing with Kang Lee's fight team. And this Savat fighter from France was watching me spar. And the guy I was sparring against was punching me through my guard. And when the bell rang for the minute rest, he said to me, he said, "Chris," he said, "what are you doing?" He said, "Tuck your sacrum underneath. It'll make your guard stronger." I'm like, So when I was like this, then it was harder for him to punch through the guard, So you see, so even boxers, will utilize this posture as well.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we call it Wuji, but, a lot of times what we're doing here is that, and this is what I love so much about Qigong stuff, is that once you understand, it's just common sense.
Yeah, that's right.
Down to common sense.
Yeah, 100%.
So common all the time.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say a couple of days ago that he was talking to somebody who was asking him to do something. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." He goes, I
have CS.
I have CS.
I have CS. I can't do what you're asking me to do.
I can do what you're asking me to do because I have a condition called CS.
That's brilliant.
And the guy said, "Well, what's CS? What's CS?" He's frustrated. He goes, "Oh, common sense."
That's so great. I'm going to use that. Me too. So I'm often pulling up, I have these, we actually had a grading last week. It was so exciting. I'm a fairly new instructor. Okay. I'm not even a black belt yet, but I've got this class that I probably teach 80-90% of the time with another more senior woman. And she's amazing. Shout out Mel Thomas. But what's really cool about this, so getting these women to the grading, like they did so well, and one lady double graded. She'd worked really hard and she was overdue and that's very rare for us to do that. And it was fantastic, and lots of, encouraging compliments, and just, they were like, "You're amazing." And I'm like, "You're amazing." It's really fun. But one of the things I really pulled them up on actually is just that really foundational stuff. If I see, we have a position that is like a rest position called Jumbi. It's like where you start and where you finish, if you're doing the traditional, and it's basically what you're talking about, that same position. It's the Wuji position. But a lot of times people, I'm going to demonstrate, will just stand straight, with the legs straight, and just stand straight. And I'm like, I do want to demonstrate. They'll just do this, like just a normal sort of standing position. And I'll be like, no, you got to do Jumbi. You got to do the hands in a particular position, and the tilting and the bent knees slightly, and it's really important. Drop the shoulders, align that spine, I say all that. Yeah. Breathe into your danjun or what you called it. And, dantian. And it's fantastic to see the difference, even in the face, when you remind them, and also in the presence. Like these positions, they also, apart from aligning you within the body, I feel like they align you to your moment, to an acceptance of where you are at.
Totally.
In that present moment. And that's right. Where you want to be on the mats. That's where you want to be in a fight. Like that's, you know what I mean?
That's where you want to be even day to day, and what you're doing.
Yeah. So
focusing on the task at hand.
100%. Right. 100%. Literally, you want to be 100%. So that's the thing. So it's like, I think that there's so much more to these. There's such not to get too caught up, but like they're so fundamental. And from these things, these small changes we make have a big extrapolated change in your life, right? When you can get this one little thing. And I imagine that's kind of what you do too, Chris. Like with your sessions, you'll find a key change that needs to occur for a person you're working with that then will have a big impact, you know?
Correct.
Yeah. For example, depression, for example, so far everybody who's come in on depression medication or anxiety medication, we've gotten everybody off their medication.
That's awesome.
And first of all, we give them some of these Qigong practices, so we give the power back to them, right?
Right.
You have the power to do this, right? But then also too, through the sessions is understanding, well, what is the root cause of depression, right? Well, it's emotional trauma turned inward. And when it's turned inward, it causes, in this case, 9 times out of 10, it causes what we call as a liver dysfunction. And liver controls blood. And well, the controller of blood is not nurturing the heart, then the mind has no place to reside, right?
Yes.
So then you see how the depression kicks in.
Yes.
But sometimes it's very subtle things too, because one of the ways that I could assess or diagnose is from reading a person's face. So every feature on your face tells me a story about how you think. And
we're laughing because he did this to me last week. But anyway,
Ditto on that.
In fact, when I first met her that night, I read her face.
Well, damn.
I wasn't going to make that mistake again. So you didn't know I was reading her face, but I was reading her face. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But it also tells us potential diseases, and also inside the body also tells us emotional trauma inside the body as well too, which turns into disease and inflammation, right? And sometimes, like you said, sometimes it's something as simple is just letting the person know, well, I see this line on your face, which means that even if you said you dealt with it, which I believe you've dealt with it, somewhere in your system is still there, because otherwise that feature or that line would be gone.
Yes, it's so true. I once did this amazing, like literally life-changing personal development work, which I did just before meeting my current husband. And I believe it emptied me out, like made space, like we talked about before in a way. And then I gave up smoking on the 8th of the 9th, 2010, 8, 9, 10, a couple of weeks before we met. And I don't think he would have gone out with me if I was smoking. So, all these funny things like you guys. But what was interesting was I remember after doing this 2 or 3 day personal development, I came home and I took photos. My face looked different. I looked so different. Like it's remarkable. I could show you the photos. I've since lost that glowing sheen, over the last few years, but
You still have the sparkle.
it's something still there. Yeah. But
somebody sprinkled some pixie dust on you still.
Yeah, right, man. Totally. I'm definitely pixie blood. But it's just really interesting that you can see it, and you can see it in someone's face when stuff is going on. I mean, anyone who's at least a little bit empathic has an element of face reading already going on, And
so that's why we call it the ever-changing face, because if you change, what we say is that if you change the emotional response. So here we are in the heart of Hollywood, and where everybody wants to look good, or majority of the people want to look good, right? And so people say, well, what about Botox? Well, or fillers or whatever. And they say, well, the thing of it is that if they don't change... If they don't change the emotional response.
We're on a podcast. We're squeezing our faces back, just so you guys know who aren't watching this video.
If you don't change the emotional response or the underlying trauma, those lines will come back.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Sorry, you go.
Yeah. I'm sorry. The two most changeable features on your face is your mouth and your eyes.
Yes, that makes perfect sense to me. And the thing that you're saying about changing the original experience or changing the original emotion. I mean, you can't change an experience, but you definitely can change how it exists in the body and how it exists in the mind and how you interact with it. And there's that great expression, the issues are in the tissues, like our cells, and particularly for you and I, Parisa, in our, with a Eastern European Jewish heritage, which I also share, we have, 1,000 years of anti-Semitism that we're just casually carrying around. You know what I mean? It's like, it's in there. And so we have great cause to work on this stuff because we're clearing generations of epigenetic information. And, epigenetics, Chris and I mentioned this before, very interesting about the way that we carry the trauma of our forebears.
Yes, and the way that the cells unlock and reproduce and make copies of each other.
Right.
And now we're starting to get into the concept of timelessness, immortality,
Nice.
and exploring just the different capabilities of this human body, this skin suit that we're in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, it's cool stuff. I read this
I
cool
was
thing
thinking
recently.
about go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say Newtonian and Einstein time, the two different types of time. Look that up. It's very cool.
Oh, relative versus
Finite.
finite. Yeah. Wow. It's all just
Yeah.
an illusion.
It really
I
is.
was thinking about the quote. There's a quote from Master Ni. He's one of the Taoist masters. Chris has had a reading, and his sons, Dr. Dao and Dr. Mao, they founded Infinichi and Yosan University down here in LA.
Cool.
In his book, he says, just as the fish is unaware of the fact that it lives in water, we too are unaware of the vast, inexhaustible sea of energy or sea of chi that supports our life.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
so we have this ability to tap in because it's all around us and it's within us.
Yes.
And when we clear these blockages, it's like riding a wave. For any surfers, it's like you swim against the current, then you get out there and then you catch the wave and you ride that wave. And we have the ability to do that in our life as well.
Oh, it's so great. I remember one of the masters that came and taught us once talked about defense time and attack time in sparring. And the defense time, you speed up, and defense time, you slow down, and attack time, you speed up. So when you're attacking, you speed up time. And when you're defending, you slow it down so you can see what's coming.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, man. So like we can use our ability to connect differently with the energies around us with things like time to change our experience,
Yes.
Correct.
Totally.
And it's not crazy woo-woo magic stuff. It's actually physics.
No.
I mean, it's
Science. Yeah,
Science, yeah.
exactly.
It's actually quantum physics. And we often think that this is all woo-woo, new age spirituality. It's not. It's ancient. What we now call quantum physics is ancient philosophy. And, like we just have new names for the same stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So going back into, manifesting and those kinds of things,
Yes.
it's based upon that same idea. Right. And so that's why it's so important to be conscious of your thoughts and what you're thinking about and what you're saying to yourself. And then to also what other people say to you. We just did every week we release a video on YouTube on some health related topic. And today, Parisa and I did one together for Christmas, for the holidays, on how to combat the stress of the holidays, or tools to help with the stress of the holidays. And, there's a lot of times that, I don't know how it is in Australia, but at least here in the US, that because you're born into a family, it's like, well, you have to put up with whatever it is that they dish out to you.
Yeah.
And so besides giving some Qigong techniques and some essential oil techniques and such like that, one of the things I suggest is, you really check in with yourself. Are you going into an environment that is unhealthy, that they don't respect your boundaries? That
Out of obligation instead of,
or what, check in, because, ultimately your body is your shrine. And I think no matter what spiritual tradition you follow or practice, this is your shrine. You are to protect that shrine. That's where martial arts comes in, to protect that shrine. Yes. Why do you protect that shrine? So that way you could show up in the world and emanate your life purpose, which
and
is
serve.
The way that God, way your God or Tao shows itself, is when a person's found that life purpose. So, protecting the shrine is making sure that we eat right, sleep right, hydrate, exercise, those kinds of things. But it's also being able to protect ourselves. And sometimes, martial art gives us the tools to to deflect, right, and also to be able to tap into some of those things if something comes up, but also too emotionally, which is energy. Also, if you're around people that are cruel or condescending, toxic people, then my attitude is that we don't have to show up for that. And it's not an avoidance strategy. For me, what it is that it's protecting the shrine. And for us, for example, like pre-COVID, our good friend down here, Eric, he's a Hollywood physique expert. His name is Eric the Trainer. He's a beautiful person. He's this massive Jewish guy with blonde hair. He's in his 50s and he's fit, but he leads from his heart. But anyways, him and his wife, she's Japanese. A few Christmases ago, we spent the time in Seattle, Washington with her family, and it was such a great time. So what we do is that we surround ourselves with supporting and loving people.
Yeah.
And if the family dynamic can't be supporting and loving, it's like, okay, well, I just have to take a step back. I don't wish any ill will, right, on you or anything. But no, I'm going to surround myself with people that support and love me. And Jim Rohn, who is one of my favorite, philosophers on personal development. He says it best in one of his audios. He says, to make yourself a beautiful person, surround yourself with beautiful people.
Yeah.
And he's not talking externally. He's talking internally.
Totally.
That's what he's talking about.
100%. Yeah. Beautiful hearts.
Yeah.
It's really funny you say that, actually, because my son the other day said, I've got purple socks on. My friend at school is going to tease me. And I said, why would he tease you for purple socks? And he said, he doesn't understand what beautiful is.
Oh,
he's nearly 5. And I was like,
oh my God.
That's so
that's
sweet.
so onto it.
That is so perfect.
Yeah.
From the mouth of babes.
Yeah. And I think you're now tapping into something else about, as a young boy growing up into becoming a man.
Yes.
I remember several years ago, we had flown, about 20 people had flown to Vegas for this concert. We're friends with some of the people in the band in Nickelback. And,
cool.
And we were having dinner one night, and this gentleman sat down next to Parisa, and we got to talking. And I said, I sew, I do most of the cooking, I shop, I do all the organizing and the deep cleaning and stuff like that. So he says to me, so I guess you're a feminine type. And I said, well, I guess you could say that, if that's the classification that you want to put me under.
That you need.
But I do not hesitate to tap into those feminine qualities.
Sure.
Like, I'm the first one to cry at Dancing with the Stars. Like, you see me there with my little tissue with tears, right? Awesome. You can ask her, like, she'll say, like, it's the truth.
Okay.
It's so touching, right? So, but anyways, what I told him is that, you could view it that way, but you had to understand that growing up as a child, I had to learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So it no longer became male or female.
Yeah.
It just was a necessity of life.
I think you said something a little bit more.
Oh, I said, yes, I did. I said, but yes, it might appear to be feminine or whatever, but I will not hesitate to punch you in the face at any point. I forgot.
Well done.
I was like, get to the punchline here, Daddy.
Punchline. Brilliant. I mean, I'm a little similar in that, I've always been in male-dominated industries. Like, I started in very female-dominated, got fired, as I mentioned. So then I went into full-on male, like legal, film, building, and martial arts, like all really male dominated industries. And I was like, had a single mom till I was about, 10 or something. And I think you do that. I think you do embody, like, there wasn't a man of the house. Yeah. So we did, like, I'm the person around our house that don't tell my husband this. I often fix things. Like, I'm often the one that will, he can. I'm just the one that often does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, if they're, I'll stand up to people too. Like, I'm the one, if I see someone, this happened just at the beginning of COVID, there was a lady being bullied in a car park. I think I talked about this recently as an example of when you channel your power.
Yes.
And, you know, there's another way you can put it, which is where you embody the goddess, you know, where you make yourself like elephant ears, where you make yourself bigger than you are, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a chi thing also. That's like a gathering of chi and then a blowing it up sort of, you know. And I did that in this car park. I saw this woman. She was an Asian woman being bullied by, you know, a white male in a pickup truck. And she had done nothing. And he was just yelling at her about how she parked, like for no reason. And I saw it and he walked away. And then I started to walk towards her to see if she was okay. And I watched him turn to come back and have another crack at her. And I just looked at him and I did the thing.
Yeah.
And he turned and walked away. So, I mean, sometimes you don't have to actually do anything. You just have to have the intention, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's a powerful, that is a powerful thing to have the ability to stand up for yourself. And again, say, you are not one of my beautiful people in my beautiful circle. Stay away, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, and right now there's a lot of, there's an escalation of violent crimes happening here in Los Angeles.
Right.
Blatant muggings and shootings, and especially in affluent areas of Beverly Hills and such. And when I was talking with somebody, because I had Parisa start taking tactical hand-to-hand combat training.
Yeah, good.
And when I was talking to somebody, it was a woman, and she was nervous about what's going on here. And I said, but if you stand with confidence,
posture.
right? You stand with confidence.
Totally.
And you make eye contact with people, like I'm aware of you.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, it changes the dynamic, because that's an energy exchange that's happening.
Right.
And bullies and thugs, what they want to do is they want to intimidate
weak people.
and increase fear, right? To instill fear. But if you stand confidently in your center, then you definitely can change a situation, like you said, just from a gaze.
Yes,
and it doesn't
absolutely.
matter how short you are or how tall you are, right?
Right.
Because you're bigger than life at that point, and they sense that, right?
Yeah. And it's, you know, my grandfather had that stare as well. He could do it when we were kids. If we did something wrong, he'd give us a look, and man, you knew, like nothing needed to be said.
You better stop doing that. Exactly.
But I also remember being out one night when I was first training in my 20s, and this person who was sort of maybe a bit nuts or a bit on drugs, or I don't know, was having some sort of episode of some kind, came running at me and my friends, like, blah, 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 you know, like really not so crazy behavior, like just being really behaving really crazy. And my friends all sort of went like this, and I turned and faced him, and he just kept running. And my girlfriend turned to me and said, how did you do that? I was like, well, I wasn't scared, you know, because I was training. And I think that's the thing. If you have the training, it's a tool in the toolbox. It allows you to defend these sacred gifts we're talking about, and this ability, you know, and it's so powerful, isn't it?
So powerful.
Man, we could talk all day. Can we do an episode 2?
Yeah, let's do a continuation.
I think we need to.
And also just on that point is that each one of us, every person who's listening to this right now, has the ability to do that same thing.
100%. Absolutely.
It's the focus and the mind intent.
Right.
And also for us ladies especially, is like when you are outside walking around in public, don't look at your phone.
Be aware.
Like, look around you and pay attention to what's going on.
And the more we practice awareness, the better off we are to notice both the more nefarious things, but also if there's someone who needs us, or if there's someone that needs us to tune in and support them in our lives, you know, like that awareness is a big martial arts thing too, you know, training awareness, training your peripheral vision, training consciousness of what's going on around you and tuning into the present. It's a powerful technique to use in your life, I think, for everything we do. And
so cool.
I love where this conversation has gone. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, no, really fun.
Super fun.
Super fun.
Yeah, well, you know, when you have like-minded people that I think they have the purpose in life of uplifting humanity, then the conversation could just keep on going, because there's no selfish intention. All it is about educating and uplifting people's lives, right? So
it's a beautiful thing. I can't wait to hang out with you guys. I don't know when, but it's going to be so much fun.
It will happen. It'll be a family reunion.
I know. It's so cool. So lots and lots of love to you both, and I hope you have a beautiful afternoon. I'm so grateful for you to take the time and be on this podcast and in this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Unboxable, unstoppable.
Yeah, that's us.
And beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, how do you spell love? Love. And we will
See you later.
Oh my God, you guys are so cute. It's ridiculous. Yeah, we're going to have to watch that one on the video, I think, guys. That was very cute with hand signals and like interpretive dance and everything. It was so good.
Exactly. We do that on the Chi Club. Yes.
Oh, it's very cool. So I'm going to put all the links so everybody can check out what you're doing in the show notes. Beautiful. Please share this conversation. It's a power-packed conversation. We can all feel it. So share the love. Let people know about these awesome two people doing amazing work over there. And oodles of love. And I'll be in touch very soon, my friends.
Fantastic. Love you and take care of yourself.
Thank you. Love you too.